Hello and welcome to our 6 p.m. newscast. I'm Daniel Che, here to provide you with the latest. Let's start with the headlines. The ministerial-level inter-Korean talks got off to a smooth start. Both sides outlined their priorities in the morning plenary session and set a positive tone for the first of hopefully many more such talks to come. Seoul and Tokyo will hold the 11th round of working-level talks, possibly dedicated to finding ways to quickly resolve Japan's long-standing wartime sex crime issue. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan was thought to be the one to finally boost the country's sluggish economy. After a year and a half of struggling to deliver what's expected of him, Choi may be passing the baton to a successor very soon. South and North Korea are holding their first government-level talks since 2007 on this Friday in a bid to improve relations and expand exchanges across the border. We go live to our Song Ji-sun standing by at the Inter-Korean Dialogue headquarters in Seoul. Ji-sun, what's the status in the Kaesong Industrial Complex where the meeting is taking place?
Daniel, good evening. But we still have no confirmation if the afternoon session, which was set for 2:30 p.m. this afternoon, has begun yet. What we do know is that the morning session, which was a plenary, came to an end after 30 minutes, with two sides exchanging their top priorities. What we do know is that the two sides had a very positive vibe between the two sides, and they have exchanged very good remarks by saying the North high-level official, who was the Chun Jong-soo, representing its unification agency. He said that it's winter now, but spring should arrive for the two sides through continued efforts by tackling this distrust, and they will build trust by dialogue. And South Korea's Vice Unification Minister Hwang Buk-i responded by saying, "Let us make the right first step."
So, Ji-sun, it seems very positive so far for the first high-level talks in 8 years. Considering the two sides did not limit agenda items to be discussed, it must have been quite a headache for both sides to take their time to decide what should be discussed first. How will the talks unfold from here on?
Well, like I said, the afternoon session has not begun yet, and that's why the two sides are very careful and cautious on deciding which agenda to narrow their differences. South Korea's Unification Ministry said they cannot elaborate on which agenda or how many items were mentioned in their plenary session. But what we do know is that Seoul will push for regular reunions for war-separated families. As we know, there are more than 66,000 people on the wait list who are waiting to see their beloved ones living across the border after 6 decades of a truce. And Pyongyang is highly anticipated to ask for the resumption of tours to its Mount Kumgang resort as a precondition to that, which it could cash in on. The tours were suspended in 2008 after a South Korean tourist was shot dead by a North Korean soldier, and Seoul demands Pyongyang guarantees the safety of South Koreans if the tours are to resume. And it will be very, very difficult for the two sides to narrow those differences during this initial round, with a very high chance that the talks could stretch far into night if it resumes. It could be rated a success if the two settle on the regularity or frequency of these high-level talks. South Korea's Unification Minister says Seoul will try to reach an agreement the public can accept and trust, as promised during the two Koreas' high-level agreement in August. Back to you.
Well, thanks for being out there for us, Ji-sun. Moving on, once again, the UN Security Council has added North Korea's human rights issue to the meeting's agenda. Permanent members China and Russia were against it to no avail. Kwon So-hwa reports.
Because the North Korean people continue to endure a, quote, real-life nightmare, is why the UN Security Council met on North Korea's human rights issues on Human Rights Day. That's what the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, who chaired Thursday's meeting, said as the 15 members of the council gathered to discuss the issue for the first time since it was officially added to the agenda last year.
Efforts to engage the government of the DPRK to improve the human rights situation in the country must go hand in hand with efforts to hold perpetrators of crimes accountable.
9 members, including 3 of the 5 permanent members, the United States, Britain, and France, voted for the topic to be discussed, while the 2 other permanent members, China, North Korea's firm ally, and Russia voted against it, along with Venezuela and Angola. 2 abstained. The Chinese representative at the meeting reiterated China's stance on the issue.
China is always opposed to the Security Council's intervention in issues concerning a specific country's human rights. The Security Council is not the place to address human rights.
But the majority of the council and experts here in Seoul believe Pyongyang's human rights crimes have wider implications and pose a threat to the international community.
It's essential to remind the international society of the seriousness of North Korean human rights issues and the need for improvement. Although there will be no use of force, the UN Security Council is trying to push North Korea in an indirect manner.
Although not a member of the council, South Korea's ambassador to the UN, Oh Jun, attended the meeting. He said despite last year's landmark resolution passed at the UN General Assembly calling for North Korea to be referred to the International Criminal Court over alleged human violations, nothing has really changed in the North since then. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Pyongyang's state-run news agency has announced the regime's first banking conference in 25 years. Connie Kim has more on the latest indicator that the communist state's looking to overhaul its flagging financial system.
Is North Korea feeling the need for an overall restructure of its financial system to coincide with economic development? The Korea Central News Agency reported on Thursday that panels of the Financial Bank Conference paid their respects to the late leaders Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun, suggesting the opening of the conference is nearing. The convention will gather representatives from the banking sector to discuss the regime's financial system. The exact date, location, and size of the conference have not been announced, but it will be the first in 25 years and the first under Kim Jong-un's rule. The re-establishment of North Korea's financial system is inevitable, experts say, with North Korea's economy expanding, especially under the young leader's reign.
Exchanges with China, giving incentives to farms to produce more, and allowing more autonomy to small companies have led to improvement in the regime's economy.
Looking at the figures, North Korea logged an economic growth rate of below 1% in 2011, and the number stood in the 1% range in the following years since Kim's inauguration. Adding weight to the argument that Pyongyang needs improved banking systems, 80% of North Koreans are reported to engage in economic activities through buying and selling at markets under the regime. Analysts in Seoul also suggest the conference is part of Pyongyang's economic development plan to establish a firm financial base for building infrastructure after a rare party congress in May. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A prompt follow-up meeting, possibly to expedite the process of resolving Japan's sexual slavery issue, is set to take place. Seoul's foreign ministry said South Korea and Japan will hold another round of working-level talks next week, marking the 11th session since the first was held in April last year. South Korea's Northeast Asian Bureau Chief Lee Sang-duk will sit down with his counterpart Kimihiro Ishikane in Tokyo on Tuesday. Seoul is demanding a formal apology and compensation for the victims exploited by the Japanese military during World War II. Only 46 victims registered with the South Korean government remain living. In total, at least 200,000 women are believed to have suffered from severe human rights abuses. President Park has vowed some kind of significant outcome on the issue by the year's end. The two bureau chiefs met for a 10th round shortly after President Park's summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe last month. Anticipation builds as this may be the final meeting of the year. More details on the suspected bomber of the Yasukuni War Shrine. He was apprehended at a Japanese airport trying to re-enter the country for a second attempt at bombing the shrine. Kim Hyun-bin has the latest.
A 27-year-old male surnamed Chun, suspected of planting explosives at the Yasukuni War Shrine last month, reportedly brought in sand-like bomb-making components when he tried to re-enter Japan earlier this week. According to numerous Japanese media reports on Friday, the materials included a timer, batteries, and suspicious items retrieved from the suspect's luggage at Haneda Airport in Japan. Police say that the materials found were similar to the ones used for the blast, adding that the suspect returned to detonate another bomb. During investigation, Chun denied that the luggage was his, but police say that the luggage and his boarding ticket matched. Japan's Sankei Shimbun reported that during the investigation, Chun initially acknowledged that he was returning to bomb the shrine again, as his first attempt failed, but changed his response soon after. Chun left Japan the day of the incident on November 23rd and was caught on camera carrying a backpack 30 minutes before the blast. No one was hurt from the blast. Seoul's foreign ministry lodged a strong complaint as the Japanese media disclosed the suspect's identity to the public. Yasukuni Shrine is viewed as a symbol of Japan's past imperialism in both China and Korea, as it holds millions of Japan's war dead, including Class A war criminals. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The leaders of both South Korea's ruling Honorary Party and the main opposition NPAD were selected as the most favored candidates for the next presidential election. That's the choice made by 30% of over 1,000 respondents to a Gallup Korea poll. Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon trailed them with 12%, and former NPAD leader An Chol-soo with 10%. Some 30% did not choose any candidates. The polling company said this is the first time that the two leaders made the top rank together since the monthly survey has been conducted since August last year. Compared to a previous result in November, ruling Honorary Party's leader Kim Woo-sung saw an increase of 2 percentage points, while the opposition bloc's Moon Jae-in saw a boost of 3 percentage points. The term Choinomics is nearing its exit from the Korean lexicon, with a third partial cabinet reshuffle expected very soon. Hwang Ji takes a closer look at Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan's past policies and the challenges ahead for his successor.
Since July last year, when Choi Kyung-hwan was sworn in as the finance minister, much of the focus was on boosting sluggish recovery that was back then hit hard by the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. In response, Choi devised a $40 billion stimulus package and eased regulations to prop up the real estate market. The loan-to-value and debt-to-income ratios were eased, allowing homebuyers to borrow up to 70% of their property value and 60% of their income for mortgage payments. This measure gave a big boost to the real estate market. A year before his term, apartment transactions stood at around 75,000 cases in Seoul, but a year later, that number shot up to over 110,000. But the measures triggered a snowballing household debt problem that's now cited as a huge obstacle for the next minister. Many consider it a major potential risk in the face of a rate hike widely expected in the U.S. And while Choi was quite successful in boosting recovery momentum and putting the economy back on track, many believe that he failed to properly address structural issues, which will also represent a challenge for the next leader of the economy.
The next finance minister will have to complete the structural reforms in the 4 sectors, putting extra emphasis on the labor sector. The new leader should also find ways to breathe new life into sluggish exports that have been the main reason behind this year's slower-than-expected growth.
Experts add that the new finance minister faces a tough year ahead, with economic conditions abroad worsening, not just with the slowing Chinese economy, but also with low global oil prices. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
The Korea-EU free trade deal will be fully implemented from Sunday, as both parties agreed during a Korea-EU summit in mid-September. According to Korea's trade ministry, non-tariff issues will go into effect, as the FTA also covers intellectual property rights, government procurement, and boosting cultural cooperation. The ministry added that comprehensive implementation will be conducive to promoting and fostering a better business environment for investments on both sides. The EU, the world's single largest economic bloc, is Korea's largest foreign investor and third largest trade partner. The Korea-EU FTA went into effect in July 2011. The Central Bank of Korea says the country's export prices have dipped to the lowest levels in decades, primarily due to the aftermath of low global oil prices. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Korea's export prices fell to its lowest level in nearly 30 years, largely due to the aftermath of falling international oil prices. This means the price of commodities sold by local exporters are at the same level as they were some 30 years ago. Data from the Bank of Korea show the export price index, an indicator of export prices, plunged 15.6% last month from the same period last year, the lowest since it was recorded in September 1989. In particular, raw materials fell nearly 5% from the previous month, prompting a drop in prices of home appliances, coal, and petroleum products. The Bank of Korea attributed the decline in export prices to the plunge in price of Dubai crude oil, which accounts for some 80% of Korea's total oil imports. The central bank says the average price of Dubai crude fell 46% in November from the same period last year to around $42 per barrel. A researcher from the Korea Economic Research Institute, Choi Nam-seok, says it's still premature to say for sure whether the drop in export prices will benefit or harm the local economy. But in theory, he says falling export prices is generally not welcome news for Korea, a country which relies heavily on exports for growth, since exporters would see their profits shrink. Kim Jung, Arirang News.
South Korea's Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and the Korean Culture and Information Service have jointly selected dozens of honorary reporters who will be contributing diverse articles for the official site of the Korean government, korea.net, and other social media sites. Altogether, 76 people have been selected, including both Koreans and foreigners from nearly 30 countries worldwide, including the U.S., Singapore, Egypt, and Bulgaria. Throughout the end of this year and 2016, they will write stories on a wide range of subjects related to Korean culture or their lives overseas, including art, tourism, and cuisine. The ministry says the aim of the project is to create a rich network of writers who will benefit from their experiences in Korea and the global community as well. And we've come to the end of our newscast. As always, thank you for watching.